All right, so today's video is going to be on what the actual biggest mistake we're making with our arm training. And this applies to, I would assume, just about every lifter, whether you're making this mistake now or you've made it in the past. This is easily going to be the biggest thing holding you back from actually making good progress in your arm training, which is obviously very important for bodybuilding and hypertrophy training, and that's what this channel is all about. So, the biggest actual mistake that a lot of people make comes down to the programming, or it comes down to your split. So the biggest problem that I see is a lot of people will generally do this for their program. And I'm not saying this is generally like a wrong way to program, but this is how, as lifters, most of us think, especially if you're more of a strength trainer or more of a power lifter. So generally, we do this. We hit each muscle about 2 times a week. And every workout, we crush some compounds, try and progressively overload and get stronger on them and add weight as much as we possibly can. And then we do some isolations, and generally we'll half-ass those and just kind of stick with the same weights and just do like 3 sets of 10 for the smaller muscles after we do those big, heavy compound barbell movements. That sounds pretty familiar, right? Exactly. So basically, the problem with this is there are no compound movements that actually prioritize your arms, unless you're like a genetic freak and you're just completely arm dominant over your torso, which is a thing, but it's just not that common. Like less than probably 5% of people are actually arm dominant. But this is generally a problem, what I'm talking about, what you're going to hear with a lot of science-based channels. And you're going to hear this problem a lot with a lot of powerlifting and strength training channels as well, which is pretty much what we all run into, and pretty much all the channels that actually give out informative content are going to be powerlifting focused or strength training focused. And that's where the problem with training for hypertrophy to get big arms is. That's where it's going to be suboptimal. I mean, basically the biggest mistake here is to go a little bit deeper into the program that I talked about, and that mindset that most lifters have, is that these lifters, and there's nothing wrong with this for the way that they train, there's just a problem with expecting hypertrophy from training this way in smaller muscle groups like your arms, or even just secondary muscle groups like your arms. And I'll explain what that means in a second. But these guys love to count sets on muscles that are secondary movers in a compound lift. So they love to count weighted chin-ups as a bicep movement. They love to count close grip bench, regular bench, incline bench. Any pressing movement, they love to count it for the triceps. Any pulling movement, they love to count it for the biceps. And it's not like those muscles aren't involved at all. Like, obviously they are, but they're a secondary mover. 99% of people are not going to get optimal results for hypertrophy by just doing those lifts, or even just doing those lifts and then some tricep pushdowns or bicep curls after. It's just not optimal. It really isn't. Those movements are good for your torso, they're good for your back, they're good for your chest. Definitely not optimal. You won't make much progress on your actual arms training with those. And there's a few different examples of this, but I'm going to stick to just arms for today. But yeah, you'll see a lot of these science-based channels count barbell rows and pull-ups as movements for your biceps, and they'll count those sets towards their bicep training. So let's say they tell you to shoot for 12 sets for your biceps per week, and you get 9 of those sets from pulling movements, and now you're just going to do 3 sets of a bicep isolation and think your arms are going to grow. I made this mistake for so long, and it's so embarrassing because it's such a common sense concept that I just was like, I guess I was just young and I wasn't thinking for myself. I was just like, oh, well, okay, my chin-ups or my pull-ups count for biceps, and I'm already doing 15 sets of those per week. I don't have to curl to actually grow big biceps. Like, okay, you could do 25 sets of pull movements every week and your biceps might not even grow. Like, I'm not saying nobody's would grow, but you will, even if they do grow, they're not going to be growing optimally. So it really is bad advice. So yeah, typically they'll count bicep volume with back training and tricep volume with chest training. And then generally to like meet their volume standards, they'll just half-ass like a 3x10 on curls or pushdowns. And then they'll just call it good. And let me ask you this, just like actually think about this for a second. The muscle that you train at the end of the workout, is that ever the muscle that you've seen the most progress in? Is it ever your best muscle group? The answer is probably no. And for most of us, that's going to be forearms, that's going to be calves, that's going to be arms. Are they ever as good of a muscle group as the ones that you train with the legit movements and put your effort into at the start of the workout? Like, most of us have great backs and chest because we start with those movements, but we don't actually have an arm day or a day where we do arms first and actually give them their proper isolation movements. It's just the way it is. This is incredibly lazy, and we should all just know this based on common sense. I mean, if you want to build a muscle, you have to train it, and you can't just count other volume as work for that muscle. Like, yeah, that might count, and that might be useful for powerlifting. Like, yeah, I mean, you don't need to maximize hypertrophy, you need to maximize strength. So sure, I mean, yeah, maybe you don't need to really do anything more than a little 3x10 on curls or push downs after your heavy compounds if you're a powerlifter, if you're training for just general strength. But if you actually are a bodybuilder, like, this advice is so bad. I mean, I think I've said that enough here, but it really is bad advice, guys. It really is. So this type of programming will at best maintain your arms. So once you build up a good foundation in your arms, you can probably get away with maintaining most of their size just by doing some heavy compounds and doing a little 3x10 or whatever on curls or pushdowns. But you are definitely not going to be gaining muscle. And I learned that the hard way. It took me like 2 or 3 years to actually realize, oh, I actually have to take my arm training seriously to get them past 16.5 inches because I've been stuck there since I was 19, you know? So now that I'm actually doing more arm training, I've made gains, my arms have gotten bigger. And what do you know? I tracked my lifts, I took them seriously, I gave myself an actual arm day, which I mentally couldn't even do before because I was just brainwashed into only compounds matter. Like, I went down the wrong road, and I'm just happy I can think for myself on this stuff now. So you guys actually have to train your arms, get an arm day, learn how to program it properly. With that being said, my intermediate and advanced program will be coming out soon. I don't have an exact date on when I'm going to release it, but it will be probably within the next month, maybe 2 months if I get really behind on stuff. But basically, this training philosophy, not even philosophy, this is legit just common sense, guys. This applies to really any secondary muscle or any smaller muscle group. Like, if you want to prioritize a muscle and you want a muscle to grow, you have to train it fresh, you have to train it hard, and you can't just be lazy with it and say, oh, well, it kind of got worked in that movement, so I'll count that. Like, no, that's just not how it works. Just not how it works. So I'm not going to keep going on this video. It's a pretty simple topic, and I don't have a whole ton to say on it, but I think I got across what I needed to. So if you have any questions, let me know for sure.